Welcome to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rose and Womble Realtor Paul Fuquay is here to share market facts, the fundamentals of selling, buying, owning, and improving your home, plus interesting experts. Now, here is Paul.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we've said before, the purpose of this show is to share real estate news, advice, and experience to help you make sound decisions on one of the biggest investments you'll likely ever make, your home, your property. It could be your farm, a condo, an oceanfront mansion, or a little two-story or brick ranch in one of the environs Norfolk or Chesapeake or Virginia Beach or Hampton or Newport News or any one of the jurisdictions in here. Very fortunately, I've had the opportunity to help hundreds of buyers and sellers and investors in Hampton Roads over the past 25 years, and that gives me a little bit of expertise. And today, in contrast to all the other shows, this is the 42nd show in this series, my co-host is myself. And because apparently I've worn out my welcome with a great many of the guests I've had. I even spoke to the mayor of Chesapeake, who was on the show several months ago, and I asked Mayor West, would you like to come on the show today? He said, nope. And I said, well, how about next? Nope. Well, how about 2 weeks from now? Maybe. So, that we can look forward to that. I think part of the problem is anybody who's involved in politics right now in this most toxic of times is reluctant to be put on the spot by a question until post-election day. That seems to be it, and I don't say that's true of Mayor West, but I do know that in today's environment, it seems as though the politicians are very reluctant to step outside the script. And that has an effect on the market. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But right now, we are in that seasonal shift that goes from a good buying period that has been changed very radically by the increase in interest rates, but it's now being compounded and exacerbated by this midterm election that's coming up next Tuesday. The home buying process is predicated in large part on an emotional decision, and part of that is the confidence people have in the future. And when our political parties and candidates are out there on the hustings talking about the negative aspects of society, and this party and that party is going to be leading us down to the doom and gloom path, the confidence of the American public tends to erode fairly quickly. And it's a shame, but it's also not uncommon. Over my career, both as a business owner in the Washington, D.C. area, and where I did work for politicians, including the White House and CBS News and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, it nevertheless is a time when the attention of the public is riveted not on their own processes and programs, but on what the future holds for them and their families as a consequence of an election. So thankfully, we'll be past next Tuesday, and there'll be some slowdown in the rhetoric that's so negative. Anyway, now my task at hand is to dispel many myths and misstatements, which tend to filter into the discussion of real estate at your back fence or over a beer or at a kid's basketball game or wherever. And I find it somewhat difficult today as a sports fan to concentrate on anything other than the fact that we have this huge smorgasbord of sports going on. This is the time of the year when, one, we get an extra hour of sleep. And, Dino, do you know when that is? Is that Sunday night or Monday night?
Yes, it's this Sunday morning at 2 a.m. when the clocks go back 1 hour.
We'll spring forward, fall back. So we pick up an hour of sleep, and that's going to help us enjoy the fact that on the sports scene we have NFL football, We have college football. We have NHL, a hockey league. We have the professional basketball, the NBA. We have college basketball starting up. We have the World Cup soccer coming down the pike. We still have golf being contested across the nation and across the world. We have NASCAR coming down to its championship.
Yep.
Have I missed a sport here? Is there anything? I don't know anything that's not. Oh, the World Series. For goodness sakes, the Phillies and the Astros.
Yep, which if it goes Game 7, I believe would be Sunday night.
It's incredible the amount of time you can spend on television watching sports. If you're a sports fan, I have to control myself because if I had 7 screens, it'd be like the set of SportsCenter. I'd watch it all at one time. Just a sports fan that has been that way since I was a little kid. I'd rather play, but I can't. So now I got to watch. Okay. Let's talk about what we did last week real quickly. We spent a good part of the show discussing the overall strengths of our real estate market here in Hampton Roads, and we also had the sales manager of Johns Brothers Security in to discuss home security and the values that are brought to the party when they install their equipment. And this is a show that's dedicated to discussing the fundamentals of real estate and what you can do to maximize your ownership, buying, and selling power. Now, if you'd like to talk to me on air, please dial 757-497-1310. 757-497-1310. That's the number here in the studio at Money Talk 1310 and AM or 100.9 FM. Now, I'd like to make the show relaxed and offer my opinion, and I'm always willing to do that and share with you the experiences I've had that may help you in the process of either selling or buying a home. What elements can protect your interests, and what is most important in striking a mutually acceptable agreement between both parties in a real estate transaction. We usually go straight into, at this time, discussion of the national scene. But before that, I'm going to touch on the changes in the interest rates. They have not been significantly changed since last week. Non-conforming, those loans over $700,000, they're at 6.875% with 1 point. All of these are predicated on sufficient funds to close, sufficient reserves, and a 740 credit score. As your credit rating changes, the rates will change because of the risk associated with it. A conforming 30-year, that's any loan under $699,000, and you can find conforming loans at 5%, 10%, 15, 20% down, and that is carrying right now 7% interest rate with 1.5 points. Conforming investment, and these are the higher risk loans. You need 25% down. It's not for second home purchase. It's for a rental or something of that nature. 7.625% with 1.75% points. What you'll see in most instances, investors today are bringing a very significant amount of cash into the transactions, into the deals, because they don't want to pay that kind of rate. FHA, to a limit of $488,750. That's the loan limit under FHA is 6.625 with 1.25 points at closing. And a VA, of course, has no limit, and it's at 6.75% with 1 point. If you are considering buying after you've sold the house you currently are in, the aspect of a higher interest rate might be fearful. However, it is also a grist for the mill of refis. And I know the mortgage loan brokers are very, very determined to try and get people into houses because they can get double whack on the income generated from the sale or from the placement of a loan. One, the initial loan, and then secondly, a refi when the rates fall. And it quite honestly makes significant sense to get in now before the declining inventory continues to make prices grow. Now, what we're going to talk about is the fact that the National Association of Realtors just released its 2022 profile of home buyers and sellers. And I'm not going to belabor the moment or this show with all of the detail that's in there, but there's some very interesting aspects of the report of what the profile of buyers and sellers look like during this year. And for the first time, the share of first-time home buyers was the lowest percentage of the buying public as ever recorded, and that's only 26%. That's since 1981. The National Association of Realtors did not gather this kind of information prior to 81. So they see at 26% the share of first-time home buyers is incredibly low. And the typical first-time buyer now is at an all-time high, and this doesn't seem like very old, 36 years of age. At one time, when houses were less expensive and rates were, of course, a little better, you saw the first-time home buyer being in his 20s, late 20s. It seemed to be the right number. The other interesting aspect of this story that came out, and I'm trying to figure out why, but the median distance between the home that recent buyers purchased and the home from which they moved was, in 2022, 50 miles. You know, that's like moving from here to Franklin. Mm-hmm. That's a record high and is a threefold jump from the median of 15 miles, which was in place from 2018 through 2021. The share of homes purchased in small towns and rural areas during 2022 were at all-time highs. Now, Dino, you live in essence, a suburb?
I live in Virginia Beach, so...
Yeah, that's a suburb.
Yeah.
I wonder what part of Virginia Beach can be considered urban. Is there it's like Norfolk, you have a city. There's an urban center.
I guess town center area?
But there's no housing, is there?
They're building a lot of apartments, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the apartments you rent, apartments you don't buy.
Right.
I mean, town center itself has the condos and the penthouse and all that stuff in that Westin Armada Hoffler Tower.
And they're getting ready to build more where the former Pembroke Mall was.
Right. So I assume that we could consider that an urban area, although it doesn't seem like an urban area to me whatsoever.
Right.
But the growth in 2022 to the number of people who bought in small towns of 29% and rural areas of 20% or 19%, that's an incredible jump. In the meantime, that nearly 9 out of 10 buyers and sellers always used a real estate agent or broker. I like that because that's how I make my living.
Well, I can see why.
Yeah, well, one, we bring expertise to the thing, and there are a lot of reasons, and I have this show so that I can expound on what I know, and you can determine whether or not it would be useful for you or suitable for you to use my services in the processing of the transaction that allows you to have a new house. I just saw on the TV feed on the Something in the Water, we had a guest, Taylor Adams, who was the Director of Economic Development. He was there with Pharrell.
Okay.
We'll have to get him back.
Another of the many famous people that you've had here on the Real Estate PB&J Hour.
Well, I don't know. I can't say they're famous, but they get things done. That's what I like. Anyway, all right. Now, I'll give you something. There's a recent article in the Washington Post published on the 27th of October. It chronicles a fellow named Larry Frem who listed his townhouse in Laurel, Maryland, which is a hot market, this past August. And his agent assured him that it would sell in 3 or 4 days. Well, they missed the time frame, in all honesty. That's not what's happened. This is out of the Post. He's a communications professional, and he needed to relocate to Seattle by the end of September for a new job. And initially, the projection was 3 to 4 days, and then it became a week, and then it became 2 weeks, and then it became a month. And at 2 months, he reduced the price by $20,000. And that would have been very unusual, according to the Post, only weeks earlier. In fact, in July, the average home in his area of Laurel, Maryland, was selling for over asking price in about 12 days. He brought his house on the market in just the wrong time. It was the final gasp of the nationwide seller's bonanza that finally stalled, because that marked the start of the interest rate. And again, it's not only the financial implications of increased interest rates, it's also the blow to consumer confidence.
I can see what you're saying there, Paul, because earlier, when the housing boom was really going on, you had the opposite, where people were outbidding other buyers.
Oh, yeah.
Where if he would have put this house on the market at a different time period, he could have
June.
He would have probably increased what he was asking for and gotten it.
Well, what we found is that if you price the property up in accordance with the comparable properties in the neighborhood, you didn't have to push the envelope. You didn't jack it up, but the market would do that. And the key thing was to make certain that you got a fair return on the effort and you got a fair return on the house. And what we saw was that there was such a paucity of inventory that was prepared to sell right now, that when yours was, immediately you'd get 3, 4, 5, 7 offers. And people had to make that decision in a minute to make an offer. I know I had one. It was a $700,000 and some odd house, and I think I had, recollection doesn't fail me, I think I had 4 offers. And the one that was most astounding was one that offered up to a maximum of $50,000, an increase over every other recorded offer by $5,000 until they reached their limit. And my clients did not choose that one because the loan structure wasn't strong. Okay. Now, in this market right now, we have, a minute and a half?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Well, I won't go too much, but what we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about the decreased competition for buyers out there that can change the scope of your approach to the market. And it used to be that unconventional financing didn't work. Now, we're going to take a break. You're listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour with Paul Fuqua, and we're streaming live on MoneyTalk1310.com or 1310 AM 100.9 FM. If you have any questions, call 757-497-1310 or contact me at paulfuquarealtor.com. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue discussing real estate and the market today.
Now back to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua gives you the fundamentals of real estate selling, buying, owning, and improving your home.
Well, welcome back from the break. You're listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour, 1310 AM, 100.9 FM, or MoneyTalk1310.com. If you have any questions and would like to allow me to wish that I explain something I've said or expand on anything that we're discussing, please call us at 757-497-1310, 757-497-1310. And as always, you can subscribe at no cost and listen to past episodes of the PB&J Hour at your convenience on the YouTube channel, the Real Estate PB&J Hour. We were going over some of the interesting stuff that was recorded and reported on by not only the National Association of Realtors, but also the Washington Post. And that was that the decision-making process now in home purchasing, it need not any longer be an instantaneous decision. Buyers are finding they can take a day or 2 or 3 days to consider their purchase. They don't have to make it in a couple of hours. And we are also seeing a higher incidence of the home inspection contingencies that were being ignored in the frenzy to purchase earlier in this year. And that's definitely an advantage to the buyer. What my clients do, if they follow my suggestions, is have the home inspected prior to listing it so that we're not caught with any surprises. It's terribly disappointing for a buyer to have a home inspector come back to them after a thorough inspection and be confronted with a list of repairs that must be made or should be made to bring the house into code or compliance with code. And it's far better, I think, for the sellers to know what needs to be done beforehand and get it done. One, they can plan the expenditure. Two, the time frame is not as significant. It does, however, add time to the process before you get onto the market. Now, sellers still have a major bargaining chip. There is and remains an excruciating low inventory of houses for sale. And that's not only resale, but also the housing starts for builders is down. And this scarce supply of houses on the market is the reason that prices have not declined more dramatically. Now, Fannie Mae predicts that the average home price in 2023 will decline by 1.5%. $400,000 house, it's going to go down 4,000. And that can be offset very easily by making certain that the grass doesn't have weeds in it, in all honesty. It's how you present the house. In terms of this excruciating low supply, there were, as of this morning, November 3rd, 4,099 active residential listings, of which 3,373 are single families and 733 are attached homes. Those are condos, co-ops, townhouses, quads, and other attached dwellings. This is on the MLS as of today. Last week, our counts were 4,113 total, 3,360 single-family, and 750 attached. So we're seeing a slight decrease in listed properties week to week. Now, it may change, but I tend to think, again, this is part of the seasonal shift. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and people don't want to put their houses on the market prior to the holidays, which in many instances can be a mistake because very seldom is your house not looking better than during the holidays when it's decorated. In fact, I have been very successful in my career selling an awful lot of houses in December right after Christmas.
Somebody made those Christmas cookies before you showed a potential buyer.
Well, and it smells great. Nothing better than the smell of freshly baked bread or cookies or even toast. Now, the number of properties out of this 4,099 that are actually available is 3,267, which is and represents an increase of 2.2% or 72 from last week's 3,195. Now, week-to-week comparisons are helpful when you're charting what you're going to do with your property if you are thinking of selling it. For the overall economic rationale to discuss where the market's going, we really want to look at month-to-month and year-to-year. I'm not going to do that and bore you with these numbers because hopefully you're on your way home or you're driving and it can put you to sleep. But I will touch on the number of actual sales closed last week, was 661. And as of the reporting that I was able to pull down today for October, and remember, sales in October actually close, and they close into the first week of November. But we only had 2,165 homes recorded as sold on the MLS as of this morning. And yet September was 2,759, August 2,939, July was 28, June 3,984, May 3,339, April 3,706. So you can see there's a 33% decline in closed transactions. And that's a consequence, I think, of the change in the rates and the fact that some buyers pulled out of the market because they'd been disappointed in once or twice trying to put contracts in and not being able to match their competition. All of the changes we're seeing are somewhat familiar to me, having gone through in this business the 2008 to 2011 meltdown in terms of buyer attention to the market and in terms of the number of people who come into open houses or come in to see a house that you have listed. Again, the inflationary pressure is exacerbated by the confidence-robbing political theater and rhetoric that we're in the middle right now, I think is added to that, but it will rectify itself. I'm very hopeful and very positive because housing is a critical element of our lifestyle. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a house, you're living in your car or a shelter or in a tent somewhere. And believe me, a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I went camping, and we slept in a tent. And from now on, my roughing it and camping is the best Western. I'm done. There were people that we were in a big camping area up there in the Shenandoah Valley on the river, and it was a wonderful view and all this. And I got to see stars, the likes of which I haven't seen in years. But at the same time, camping is it takes some effort. You can't just go out there and pitch a tent in 5 minutes.
Right.
It took me about an hour and a half to put up this tent that we've had in our family for 20 years, much less inflate the bed or whatever it is. And, it seemed as though it was more work than I've ever had to experience to spend the night in an uncomfortable situation and freeze my tuchus off. I don't think I'm ever going to go camping again unless it's in a 36-foot motorhome that costs them $500,000. Okay. Now, at this time in the show, we generally review very quickly what was discussed in the last week's show, and we had Tiffany Horton, who's the sales manager at Johns Brothers Security, and she was here touting, of course, Johns Brothers wares and, of course, discussing the elements of security systems that are available now. She stated, and I think quite rightfully, that Johns Brothers has competed successfully with the ADTs of the world for years and years by embracing local needs, knowing the local economy and neighborhoods, and utilizing the very latest technology. It is a locally based, locally owned firm. Today, when asked what were the most important elements for installation in a security system, and it's cellular communications and cameras. That's what people are really zeroing in on, especially cameras.
Yes, especially cameras now, when you've seen such an increase of these catalytic converter thefts.
Yes,
and
wonderful.
Yeah, and of course the holiday season's coming up with the packages and the porch pirates that like to go ahead and steal people's packages.
I think I said to her, of course, I have 2 dogs that if you set foot on the front stoop, they immediately howl. Mm-hmm. They are not ferocious. They're little yappy-looking dogs, and they yap. One has a bark that is about twice its size, and it only weighs 20 pounds. But that aspect of my life helps, I think, maintain some security. Now, we have a ring, and as much as I've been involved with security systems as a realtor and advising people on how to get them and where to get them, and having worked with Johns Brothers over a number of years, I've never really wanted to buy a house in a neighborhood where I needed a security system. Mm-hmm. And that 12-gauge pump that goes, that to me is the ultimate security system. But it means that you've got to be there. She recommended the systems and number of cameras is for, a standard 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-story house. She's two cameras and all the door coverages. They have a minimum package that Johns Brothers offers. You can call them. Also, she did report that fines are continuing to be levied by the cities for false alarms. You have to register your fire alarm or your security system with most of the jurisdictions here, and Johns Brothers supplies that form. And then they also have come up with all manner of ways to communicate with a larger group of people around your alarm system, so that if you are not available by phone when something goes off, in many times they would immediately call the police in as on an alarm basis. But now they have these message groups, which makes sense. So try and expand the number of people, if you have an alarm system in place, who can take the call and have the codes so that you will not be exposed to fining after 2 or 3 instances. I like John's Brothers. They're good people. They're local. And they certainly do know this area. I haven't compared them, their rates to others, but many's the time when it can possibly be a life-threatening situation. I'd rather be paying a little more a month, maybe $5 or $10. That's up to somebody else to determine what his or her budget is. If you have elderly family members, Ms. Horton pointed out that they have monitors that they can communicate 2 ways through those. And then the last question I asked her, how long does it take to install one of these things? Are we talking about a week? You're going to have technicians, and the average time is 2 to 3 days, depending upon the complexity of the system. Do we have a break coming up, or do we want to continue?
We've got about 4 minutes.
All right. Well, we last week we also discussed the general market here, and I don't know if we want to belabor that. There is a continuing desire on the part of people to find the proper houses and to find the neighborhoods that they want. There are some things that never disappear from the search criteria, and that is, of course, location. How far are you from your place of work? How far are you from your children's school if you have children of school age? How far are you from travel if you want to travel? And is shopping within a reasonable distance? For the life of me, having grown up in the city, I don't know how people deal with a 30-minute drive to go to the grocery store. That's just beyond my comprehension, but I've never lived on a farm, and I will never camp again without there being a big refrigerator. When we went camping, I will tell you that they told us that there was power available at the campsite. So when I'm loading up the car with this stuff, I have these plastic bins so you can throw the sleeping bags and all the paraphernalia in those, so it's easier to load. And I noticed this one was clanking a little bit, and I asked my wife, Corey, what's in there? She says, the Keurig coffee machine. So we're out there, we're supposedly camping, and all these other people are roughing it, and we got the Keurig hooked up, so we're making coffee. I didn't even get to percolate anything, and I had one of those perculating pots, with the little glass top
that you'd put over a campfire.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the campfire, we built a campfire and just watched it, so it wouldn't go out. Oh, because we had no problem with our Keurig getting our coffee in the morning. And these other folks are looking at us like we just dropped in from Mars.
Did they have Wi-Fi there, too?
Not at the campsite, but
I'm surprised.
I could get out on my phone. As a matter of fact, I think I've lost my phone here. Oh, and there's nothing worse in this world than being without your phone. Okay. Now, when we come back, my special guest is me. I'm going to interview myself as though I were sitting at the other chair, and you're going to get to hear my answers if you really don't want to. It's Paul Few. We hope you enjoyed the station break. Remember, you're listening to Money Talk 1310 AM and 100.9 FM and MoneyTalk1310.com. This is the Paul Few, the Real Estate PB&J Hour. We'll be back in a little bit.
Now back to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua gives you the fundamentals of real estate selling, buying, owning, and improving your home.
Welcome back. We're talking about security systems and the state of the market, and I'm going to interview myself. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour. I'm Paul Fuqua. You're listening to us on Money Talk 1310 AM, 100.9 FM, or MoneyTalk1310.com. Now, if you have any questions, please call me here at the station, 757-497-1310. I'll repeat, 757-497-1310. By the way, the weather this weekend is going to be phenomenal.
I saw that. It looks like we're going to be in the 70s.
74 tomorrow, upwards of 76 to 78 on Saturday and Sunday. So this is a time where you can enjoy the outdoors. Don't be cooped up watching sports, as I will be over the weekend, as much as possible. But my special guest today is my alter ego, Paul Fuqua. So I'm going to, with the assistance of Dino Franza, basically interview myself. And my first question is, Paul, give your audience a brief description of your background. Well, okay, Paul, I'll do that. I grew up an Army brat. There were 6 kids. I was the eldest. And I became accustomed to moving very early in school, probably 7 or 8 grade schools and 3 high schools. Spent most of my life enjoying the experiences of being a military brat and having access to facilities. Do we have a call?
Paul, we do have a caller. Let's go to Roger. He is in Virginia Beach. He has a question here on the Real Estate PB&J Hour.
Fire away, Roger.
Hi, I live in Windsor Oaks area, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
just wondering, quiet cul-de-sac, how long in the market that's slowed down, if I put it on the market for $400K, how long would it be on the market, would you suppose?
I can tell you what the average time is currently. It's about 25 days from the day it hits the market to the day you have a ratified contingency-free contract.
Okay,
However, that's predicated on the condition of the property
right.
and how well it is priced in accordance with the comparables in your neighborhood. I'm familiar with your neighborhood. I've sold houses in there, but I can't tell you with any degree of certainty what the values would be. What we try and do is pull up the comps,
Yeah.
the similar properties with bedroom count and footage and bathroom count and amenities.
Are people buyers? Are buyers still willing to competitively bid?
Well, not as often as they once were. There is still a significant demand because there is such a
Low inventory.
Yeah. It comes down to how well your property, your home, meets the expectation that the price sets.
Yeah.
You know, if people walk into a $400,000 priced home, they expect to see the elements that a $400,000 house would normally carry. You know, what kind of countertops, what condition are the floors in, have the windows been replaced, are they recent, how well has the house been maintained, what's the age of the HVAC and the electric hot water or gas hot water heater or whatever. I don't want to belabor all that, but one of the things that we look at when we visit a prospective listing is what elements we have to address that can be objections.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your info.
Thank you so much for calling. Feel free to call again.
Yes,
And thanks for listening.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, now, Paul, you can go ahead and start interviewing yourself again.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do this. Roger would interview me. I grew up an Army brat, but my father ended up in D.C. When I was somewhere 4th or 5th grade, somewhere in that range. And other than one high school year spent in Germany when he was over there, D.C. was my home. It's where I went to high school. And other than the 1 year I spent with them in Bad Kreuznach, and I went to school in Wiesbaden at the H.H. Arnold High School, which is the Air Force High School in Wiesbaden. And I enjoyed that immensely. It was very difficult to play sports and have to make the commute back and forth from Bad Kreuznach to Wiesbaden and reverse. So I ended up spending the week with teammates because I played football and basketball there. And then at the end of that school year, we moved back to D.C. My father was part of the Kennedy administration. He was very fortunate. And then when he was assassinated, my father retired after 30 years in the United States Army. I was originally going to go to West Point. I had an appointment, dependent upon my grades, but in February of my senior year, I had a motorcycle accident, fractured my back, displaced a vertebra, and was instantly 4F, which ruled me out of West Point. And fortunately, Georgetown University had offered me a scholarship, academic, because they didn't give athletic. I certainly wasn't much of an athlete at college level. I did play 1 year. And they honored the scholarship after I'd turned it down. So I was able to go to Georgetown. And from there, my professional career kind of spiraled. My question to myself is, what about your professional career helps you in real estate? Well, I was a political science major, which in essence was a form of study of marketing before marketing became the big number, the big issue. And my senior thesis was on the aspects of elections that have an impact on the choice by the electorate and how that can be manipulated. So I enjoy following politics. And my initial ambition was to be a lawyer until I spent that first semester and a half in law school and realized I don't like this stuff. No, sorry. I don't like living in a world of precedent. I want to live in a world where I can make the decisions, and if I make mistakes, I can afford to hire the lawyers to represent me. I didn't want to be dealing with circumstances that other people hired me to salvage for them. And then because of the experiences I had the opportunity to write speeches and and did magazine articles, and I was a publications editor with a national association in D.C. And I found, and that was while I was in college in my first year of law school, I found that working with words and ideas, that was something I really enjoyed, and I especially enjoyed it because it was process oriented, like beginning, middle, and end. And I seemed to be good at it. And each issue of each magazine I edited was a project. You had a page one, you started it, and you compiled the content, and then you finished it, and it went off to the press and was distributed to the readership, and that was a completed project. And that really suited my personality. So I am a project-oriented person. And I was very fortunate that I had a business acquaintance and friend who was very involved in list maintenance at the time, specifically for politicians. And he was also representing a number of developments outside the D.C. area who were offering steak knives if you came and visited. And they asked him to have someone to write and design the letters. They didn't know anything about it, but they knew that they had these steak knives, and they knew that if they got you up there, that there was a 1 in 20 chance that you would buy one of these units. And I don't know if they were a timeshare. For the life of me, I can't remember. But whatever it was, I wrote a very, 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 very successful letter that was emulated by a large number of people and made a lot of money for them, made a lot of money for him because they kept using his services. And they started buying bigger and bigger and bigger quantities of these letters. And they asked me to handle that. So I'm working full-time for the association. I'm doing the magazines, and I've created this little business on the side in my basement. And I would place the printing. And, you're printing 100,000, 150,000 of these letters and distribute them. And I'd get these big checks. But the majority of that money went back out to the printer. I said, I'm at the wrong end of this check. So started looking to see if I could get into a business I knew nothing about, and that was printing. I knew words, and I knew typesetting and design and the elements of structuring a publication and brochures and marketing materials. So anyway, found a little printing company that was failing and ended up taking it over. And it grew from, at the age of 27, I was the president of a 15-employee firm that grew to being, I think I ended up with, the highest count was about 70 employees. Most of the time it ran about 60. We were doing more than $8 million worth of business in D.C., and I had great clients. I had the Kennedy Center, and I had the Smithsonian and the Friends of the National Zoo, and a lot of associations and the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges and Georgetown University and George Washington. It was a great business, and I loved it, and I felt most satisfied because I could go out on that dock of my plant in Kensington, Maryland, and I could see what I'd achieved that day through my company. I had boxes full of projects done. I loved it. It was beginning, middle, and end. And then circumstances were such that I wanted to kind of move out of D.C. and move out of the printing business. So I made an offer to my employees. I assembled them together, and they ended up buying me out, my key ones. And I decided I'm going to now semi-retire. Where am I going to move? I ended up in Hampton Roads to a friend.
And then how did you get into real estate?
Well, I thought I could play a halfway decent game of golf, and I discovered when I started playing VSGA events, I couldn't, and I was frustrated at that. I had a couple of consulting gigs that were working. Cox Communications was one. They wanted membership retention. I had a couple where I was traveling back and forth to D.C. with associations because I had a little bit of experience and expertise in membership retention. And that's what Cox wanted to do. So we came up with the Family Value Club and all this other stuff. But it meant travel. And my wife was pregnant with our son, and I made changes, one in my life, in that I wasn't going to try and play competitive golf because I knew I suck. I can go out there and I can be a single-digit handicapper, but these guys, when they're playing, the really good guys, they are out of this world. And I wasn't there. I mean, I'd have 15 great holes, and then there'd be 3 disasters, and that you can't do it that way in the real world of competitive golf. So I was bored, and I'd been an investor because I had this great borrowing power in the D.C. area because of all the iron out of my. I was buying these $2 million presses and stuff, and so people like to lend me money. And I survived a couple of recessions and grew and doubled down on things. When the recessions came, boom, that's when I spent more money. And I increased my staff, and I increased my selling, and I increased my marketing, and increased my capacity because I knew that there are other people who weren't as strong as I was financially, nor as strong in terms of state-of-the-art technology. Anyway, so I thought, what can I do here that I'm familiar with that I could make a decent living at in conjunction with what I've already achieved? And real estate seemed like the one. I had the skill set. I knew how to market. I knew how to phrase things. I knew how to talk, and it was competitive. And I liked competition. I was a basketball coach in college and high school levels, and I'd always been very competitive at everything I did, and I think that's what ruined my golf game. The adrenaline that you need flowing when you're playing baseball or you're racing an automobile or dirt riding motocross or enduros at an AMA level or whatever you're doing, that adrenaline doesn't help you on the golf course. You need beta blockers for that stuff.
Now, they do say deals are made on the golf course. Have you ever made a deal to sell a home?
No.
Have you ever sold? I'm sure you've sold a home on the golf course.
I've sold.
Probably quite a few.
When I first went into the business here, the only thing I really knew about Hampton Roads is where all the golf courses were. So I said, all right, I know how to get to Elizabeth Manor, so I'm going to be an expert, and I know how to get to Cavalier, and I know how to get to Princess Anne, I know how to get to Greenbrier, and Elizabeth, I know how to get to these places, and so I know those neighborhoods. So I held myself out as a golf course expert. If you wanted to know about houses around one of the golf courses in this area, boom, I was the guy, and still am. I'm still interested. I just don't play as well or as often as I once did. So that was what was my break. And then there were certain instances where I was being sought by builders because I had this marketing capacity. I knew how to do the flyers, and I could work with graphics, and my language usage was decent, and they needed that kind of guidance. So I was very successful in dealing with builders. In that time, and we're talking about the early 2000s, the late 90s and early 2000s, when there were a lot of pickup builders. And a pickup builder was a builder who built probably anywhere from 8 to 15 houses a year. They just didn't have the money. Most of those guys are gone now because the 2008, 2011 crash killed them. Some of them survived. Now, best of all, I found that I enjoyed working with people on residential properties. There was joy. There was a beginning, middle, and end to the process, so that people would come to me and say, well, we're looking for this, this, and this. And fortunately, I was able to help them find it. And then there were people that were bringing properties to me because they knew that I knew how to structure the marketing plan so they'd get the traffic, so they'd get the offers. And I'm very fortunate in that I've been successful over these years. And the business has its downside. I'm not going to belabor those. There are certain things that unfortunately we see as real estate agents that we really don't want to see. But there's a lot of happiness, and I enjoy helping people. At the same time, it's lucrative. I can make a very good living if I work hard at it, and that's what I try and do. It's almost time for us to end. So,
yeah. I've got one more question.
Okay.
This is back to your camping trip.
Oh, God, please spare me.
You brought the Keurig.
Yes.
Because you had electricity.
Yes.
Please don't tell me you brought a microwave.
No, there was no microwave. No. There was a Coleman camp stove, though, that was propane fired that we never used. Okay. I want to thank everybody for joining us for another episode of the Real Estate PB&J Hour. We hope you enjoyed the broadcast and learned a little more about the market and the investment opportunities and other stuff. This is Paul Fuqua. You can reach me at paulfuquarealtor.com. I'm also affiliated, of course, with Rosenwamble Realty. But please go to the YouTube channel, the Real Estate PB&J Hour, and at no cost, just sign up as a whatever it is, something subscriber, so that I can justify continuing. And I hope that you'll join us next week here at... No, is it next week? Yeah, next week. Hey, have a great weekend, folks. Thank you for listening, and I enjoyed bringing something to you today.